The early understanding of respiration and oxygen exchange, why breathing was not always understood clearly. Breathing feels so basic that it is easy to assume humans always understood it. You inhale, you exhale, and your body stays alive. But for a long time, people did not really know what breathing was doing inside the body. The actual exchange happening in the lungs was not obvious. This is interesting because respiration is one of those processes that feels simple from the outside but becomes much more complex. The early idea that air was just life force, before modern chemistry, air was often treated as a mysterious substance connected to life. Some ancient thinkers believed breathing brought in a kind of vital force or spirit that kept the body alive. That idea made sense at the time, because people could clearly see that breath and life were connected. What they did not know was that air is not one single substance. It is a mixture of gases, and only part of it is directly used by the body during respiration. Why observation alone was not enough. Early physicians could observe that animals and humans needed air, but they could not easily see what air was doing once it entered the lungs. The body hides most of its important processes internally. How do you explain something you know is essential but cannot directly see? For a long time, people relied on broad explanations because they did not yet have the tools to separate gases or measure oxygen. How the lungs were first viewed. The lungs were often understood mainly as organs involved in cooling or ventilating the body. Some early theories suggested that breathing helped regulate internal heat. This was not completely random, but it did not explain the deeper chemical role. The lungs were seen as important, but not yet as the site of oxygen entering the blood and carbon dioxide leaving it. The shift towards studying air chemically. A major change happened when scientists began studying air as something that could be tested and separated. Instead of thinking of air as one invisible thing, they started realizing it had different components. This shift mattered because respiration could finally be studied as a chemical process, not just a physical movement. Once air became measurable, breathing became easier to understand scientifically. Why oxygen changed the explanation of breathing. The discovery of oxygen changed everything. Scientists began to understand that the body takes in oxygen from the air and uses it for internal processes. This was a huge shift because it showed that breathing was not simply about moving air in and out. It was about bringing in a specific gas that cells need to release energy. Without oxygen, the body cannot efficiently produce the energy required for life. The role of carbon dioxide was also important. Understanding respiration also required recognizing that the body releases carbon dioxide. Exhaled air is not the same as inhaled air. It contains less oxygen and more carbon dioxide. That difference helped scientists realize that something was being exchanged inside the body. The lungs were not just passive air sacs. They were part of a system where gases moved between air and blood, a simple observation that feels more important later. It is strange to think about something as ordinary as breathing into cold air and seeing your breath, or feeling out of breath after running, and realizing those simple experiences connect to oxygen exchange. In school, respiration is usually taught as a diagram with arrows. But in real life, you feel it when your body demands more oxygen. After climbing stairs or running across a field, breathing speeds up because the body needs more gas exchange to support energy use. Why blood became central to the discovery. Once scientists understood that oxygen entered the body, the next question was how it reached to. The answer involved blood. Oxygen does not just stay in the lungs. It moves into the bloodstream, where it is carried to cells throughout the body. Carbon dioxide travels in the opposite direction, from tissues back to the lungs to be exhaled. This made respiration part of a larger circulatory system, not just a lung process. The difference between breathing and respiration. One confusing part is that breathing and respiration are related but not exactly the same. Breathing is the physical movement of air in and out of the lungs. Respiration is the broader process of gas exchange and energy production. This distinction matters because someone can see breathing from the outside, but respiration happens deeper inside the body. That is probably why early understanding took so long to develop. The visible part was only the beginning. How oxygen exchange happens in the lungs. Inside the lungs, gas exchange happens in tiny air sacs. Oxygen moves from the air in the alveoli into the blood, while carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the alveoli to be exhaled. This process depends on diffusion, where gases move from areas of higher concentration to lower concentration. The structure of the lungs makes this exchange efficient, because alveoli provide a large surface area and thin walls for gases to move across. Why this discovery connected chemistry and biology. Respiration became one of the places where chemistry and biology clearly overlapped. Oxygen Carbon dioxide, blood, cells, energy, and circulation all connect. This is interesting because the body does not divide itself into separate school subjects. What looks like biology also depends on chemistry and physics. Gas exchange depends on pressure differences, concentration gradients, and molecular movement. Even though people experience it simply as breathing, the part that feels easy to overlook, because breathing is automatic, it is easy to forget how precise the system is. You do not consciously calculate oxygen needs or decide how much carbon dioxide to remove. The body adjusts breathing rate based on internal conditions. If carbon dioxide builds up, breathing increases. If the body needs more oxygen during activity, breathing changes again. This automatic regulation makes respiration feel effortless most of the time, even though it is constantly being adjusted. Why early misunderstandings were reasonable. It is easy to look back and think earlier explanations were obviously wrong, but that is not really fair. Without modern instruments, it would have been difficult to understand invisible gases and microscopic exchange surfaces. Early scientists were trying to explain hidden processes with limited tools. Scientific understanding often develops slowly because the body reveals its secrets only when the right methods exist. Final thoughts. The early understanding of respiration changed as scientists moved from observing breathing as a visible movement to explaining oxygen exchange as a chemical and biological process, discovering oxygen, recognizing carbon dioxide, and understanding the role of blood transformed respiration from a mystery into a system. Breathing may look simple from the outside, but it connects the lungs, blood, cells, and energy production. Once you understand that respiration becomes more than inhaling and exhaling, it becomes one of the clearest examples of how life depends on constant exchange. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to learn more.